will be acknowledging that you're here from as part of our staff. Make sure you get a couple pictures. All right, good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock right on the dot, and we want to respect your time as well as city staff's time. So we want to get them in and out. So we want to go ahead and start right on time. So we want to first thank you. My name is Chris Nettles. I am your representative for the Fort Worth City Council District 8. Thank you guys for coming out to have a conversation about our budget. And just we want to acknowledge our chief that's present here. Chief Aldred is with us tonight, this evening, as well as our city manager and our city staff. And so also Sarah Smith is representing our office today. So if you have a question that you want to ask us after the meeting as it relates to like bonds, streets, and whatever, get with Miss Sarah and we'll make sure we answer those questions for you. So today we want to talk about our fiscal 2026 budget cycle. We're about at the end of the road, but we're not completely done yet because we haven't heard from you. So that's what this meeting is about, to hear from you and about what you want to see in your budget, as well as we'll be talking about bond tonight too. No, next month. Okay, next month we're talking about bond. But today is your budget meeting, and so I'm going to relinquish my stance and give it to our city manager, Mr. Jay Chopper.
Thank you, council member. Well, good evening. Thank you all for coming out today. It's good to see you all out here. Like normal, what we try to do as staff is outnumber our citizens, so that we really have all these folks here to be able to answer any questions that you might have. We have the details. It's a large budget. I'm going to kick it off. We start off actually with a video, and then Christiane Simmons, who's our Chief Transformation Officer, is over the budget group, will come in and do a short presentation to kind of give the highlights, since it is a big budget. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. And then we'll come back, and at the end, we'll open the floor. We'll have mics. If you have any specific questions you'd like to ask, or something that doesn't make sense to you, or suggestions, we'll hand you the mic, and and we'll try to answer those questions. So with that, we're going to kick it off with the short little video.
Fort Worth reflects smart, strategic growth, benefiting from a fast-growing economy, safe and clean neighborhoods, and a high quality of life for all residents. This year, we reached a historic milestone, 1 million residents strong. With that growth comes opportunity to invest wisely and plan sustainably for the future. For fiscal year 2026, the city is proposing a $3.09 billion budget, including a $1.1 billion general fund, focused on 5 city council priorities: community safety, infrastructure, community investment, economic development, and responsible growth. We are enhancing community safety by adding neighborhood police officers, providing full-year funding for our brand-new EMS service, and launching a new emergency management and communications department. And just as safety is essential, so is the infrastructure that keeps our city moving. We're prioritizing street maintenance and 2 major water treatment facility projects, while strengthening staffing to ensure crucial infrastructure projects are delivered on target. Our neighborhoods remain at the heart of our plan, supported by strengthening the priority repair and neighborhood improvement programs, expanding the mobile toolshed program to assist more homeowners, and adds resources to our animal shelters. By strengthening the places we live, we also lay the foundation for a thriving local economy. To boost economic growth, we're launching a small business development program and upgrading the Will Rogers Complex and Convention Center. We're delivering for today and planning for tomorrow. This is reflected by updating service fees for water, stormwater, solid waste, and environmental protection to improve flood mitigation and ensure sustainable operations. And through PAYGO funding, a small but powerful portion of your property tax, we're increasing investment in street and park maintenance. Over the past decade, Fort Worth has kept budget growth in check, thanks to consistent tax rate reductions. The proposed tax rate of 67 cents is a decrease from last year. The typical household with a homestead exemption will pay less in city taxes this year. Out of the 67-cent property tax rate, Over 52 cents funds operations and maintenance, and 14 cents goes towards debt. We maintain a fiscally responsible strategy and a strong credit rating, enabling the city to fund upcoming bond programs. The City Council will review the budget throughout August, with a final vote on September 16th.
The biggest screen ever. Hi, good evening. Christine Simmons, being blinded. Fort Worth Lab. So as Jay mentioned, our group is the group that, among other things, develops and manages the city's budget. And I'm mostly just going to direct my comments to this side of the room, maybe, so I'm not blinded and I see a lot of staff over there. So thanks for coming out on a weeknight. I know that it's sometimes hard to make it out and learn about budget at 6 p.m. So thank you for being here. Your engagement is really important to us, and we certainly appreciate your time. I'm going to go through just a couple of highlights. Some of this the video covered, and then some of it will go into a bit more detail. And then I'll trade off the mic with another staff member just so you get a break from me after like 10 slides. But our real goal is to just get to your questions and comments that you might have. So we'll go through this, build a little baseline, and then we can discuss anything you like. So in fiscal year 26 budget development, there are a number of themes that emerge. This happens every year. Sometimes they're the same themes year over year, and then sometimes like there's something new that happens that year. So one theme that's kind of been the same for a while is just the city's rapid growth. And so with a lot of growth, you heard we hit 1 million residents last year, and that brings a lot of opportunity to the city, but it also brings a lot of challenge and complexity to the city and its operations. And so we try to do a really good job balancing off those, those trade-offs, right, with opportunity and complexity. Some seats in the front row, if anybody doesn't mind being in the front row. One thing that was a little bit different this year that maybe, come on in. Yep. No, you're fine. We want you to be here. We got some more chairs coming on this side. Go here. Yep. Don't worry about walking in front of me. Okay. One thing that was a little different this year is just the situation with our appraisal districts and our tax revenue. So property tax revenue is the city's biggest source of revenue. And we sit in 4 different appraisal districts, but our primary source of revenue and property value is Tarrant. And this year, and you may know this as engaged residents, if you're paying attention to the appraisal district, Tarrant adopted a different kind of reappraisal plan. And so they decided they would only reappraise residential property every other year. So we at the city level weren't really sure how that would translate to the property values from which we then build our tax rate. So we were running a bunch of different kinds of scenarios trying to say, if our revenues are extra constrained, here's what that would look like. And so that was something that kind of unfolded over the spring and summer months with council. And then the city really focuses on fiscal responsibility. This is very important to the council, to the city management, and certainly with a new city manager in his seat for the first time this year. He's been with the city for a long time in another role, but this was his first budget as city manager. So he wanted departments to take another fresh look at their budgets. He asked them to cut 1% from the very beginning of budget development rather than waiting, later and then trying to quickly do it at the end of the budget season. And so we saved about $7 million in the general fund just from that 1% target reduction, which departments were kind of able to decide what they wanted to do with that. And then we looked also at, we do this every year, look at fee increases and rate increases, not just increases. Sometimes fees and rates actually go down for certain types of services depending on the market. But some of the ones you're used to seeing on your water bill, we reevaluate those annually. So that happened this year too, and you'll get to see kind of how that all shook out. One thing we did not want to do, and this is because of the rapid growth that we mentioned, we didn't want to reduce the portion of the property tax rate that goes to capital maintenance. So that's the pay-go portion of the rate. That stands for pay-as-you-go. That means we're cash funding capital maintenance every year instead of issuing debt. For things like street maintenance and park maintenance, we have a steady flow from property tax for those types of things. It's not always enough, but we didn't want to reduce it further. So we didn't want to mess with that portion of the property tax rate. And then another portion of the property tax rate goes to debt service. And so we certainly didn't want to reduce that because we have to pay our debt that we already have on a schedule, but also preserve our future bond capacity. And even though we're not really talking about the 2026 bond tonight, we don't want to, as a growing city, reduce our capacity to invest in bond programs. So this year, I've been through a couple of budget cycles with the city. This is my second full one in this role. And I've seen budgets where we're adding a lot of things and sort of like people and new services. This wasn't really that kind of year. This was more of a maintaining our core services year. We were working with constrained revenues and really trying to be very fiscally responsible, take that fresh look at our departments and their budgets. But we were able to maintain some of the really important things that we hear from residents. So one of those is public safety, high service levels for police, fire, and EMS. Street maintenance, this budget prioritizes street maintenance again, like we did last year, and we'll go through some more detail here in a moment. And then looking also at community investment, so programs like the Priority Repair Program for homeowners, also a new program, the Mobile Tool Shed, which is a code compliance program. So I'd like to go through some of these milestones, sort of bucketed by the council priorities. So some of you might not know this, but the City Council has 5 adopted strategic priorities. They adopted these for the first time last year, and they're supposed to revisit these every couple of years so that we can make sure that we're really allocating the right resources to the right things. So these are their 5 priorities, and we'll go through each of these, so I won't read them now. The first, really in no particular order, is community safety, certainly something that I know you're concerned about, that we certainly hear a lot about. And the main highlights, I was going to say high stones, milestones and highlights, that's not a word. The main highlights for community safety this year. The first is a full funding year for emergency medical services. So a lot of you might know that the city acquired the role from MedStar of ambulance provider over the last few months. We went live with that on July 1st. And so next year, fiscal year 2026, we go from October to September, will be our first full year of funding of that service, which is new to the city as far as being part of our structure. And so we're really still learning a lot about what that looks like, but this budget year will be the first of a full year of funding for that. And then the next thing, new emergency management and communications department. That's not so much a new service, it's more of a consolidation, grouping together of existing people and resources that we already had within the city. And it really just creates a department for the first time and puts some great leadership there at the top and adopts a budget for them. So that's kind of 2 branches. The first is emergency management. So think about things like the city's response to the World Cup that's coming, winter storms, those kinds of emergencies. And then the second piece of it is emergency communication. So think about like 911 emergency response that way. So those personnel were carved out from police and fire where appropriate and put together in a department. And then on the police side, the police department is adding additional neighborhood police officers or patrol officers, the NPOs. Some of you may know and love your NPO. We hear a lot of great feedback about that program. It's funded in CCPD. We're adding 8 NPOs in the fiscal year 26 budget. And that's resulting from the police department studying their beats. And as you can imagine, as the city grows, you know, the boundaries of those kind of have to change so they can be responsive. And so they added some new beats, and we're adding the NPOs to match those new beat needs. And then Fort Worth ISD also requested some additional school resource officers, and so we're adding those also on the CCPD side of the budget. Infrastructure, another really high council priority. Certainly street maintenance. We typically hear about this the most, along with public safety, and it might be the same story for you. This budget prioritizes street maintenance again this year like we did last year. That's primarily done through PAYGO. So again, that's that portion of the property tax rate where we cash fund our capital maintenance. As our values grow, that portion of the property tax rates, like available funding, grows too. This year, everything extra that we had, we put towards street maintenance, and you'll get to see sort of the numbers that tie to that. The other thing about street maintenance, aside from just giving them more money to do it, is that we want to study what it would look like at council's request to do a street maintenance fee. There are some cities who do this, and council's talked about it off and on over the years. So this budget doesn't recommend that fee, but it does recommend studying that fee as part of the street maintenance budget. And so we've already started that work, and we're going to pick it back up and kind of see, okay, if we did implement a fee, like what would that look like? How much would it be? Who would pay for it? Like who would be exempted from it? That whole kind of assessment. So we'll be doing that through the fiscal year 26 budget. The city also added some additional personnel for efficient capital project delivery. So in some cases, the city uses consultants to do things like inspections or engineering, services for capital projects. And again, in some cases, the city department sort of said, I think we could do this better and cheaper and more efficiently if we just hire these positions ourselves. And so we're going to let a couple of departments try that this year and see if it really is more efficient and more cheap to do it in-house. And so we're excited about that potential investment in employees and maybe getting capital projects, continuing to really deliver those, trying to deliver those on time and on budget so they're not, sitting out there, you watching and like wondering what's happening for a long time. And then there's a couple of big water projects this year that have been on the capital plan for a long time. You might know the water department is not just a city department, but it's actually a regional utility. And so as you can imagine, with the rapid growth of the region, there are some big expansions and facilities projects that have to occur that will happen next year, really kick off next year. Community investment's the next priority, and when you think of community investment, obviously you can think of a lot of things. I kind of think of it as like housing and neighborhood services and code, those kinds of things. So a couple of things here. We're expanding the priority repair program. This is a homeowner program. The goal of it is to keep you in your house if you have an emergency that's really financially difficult. So think of like an emergent like AC repair or something in the summer. And so you can apply for the city for help with those priority repairs. And this is a popular program. We sometimes have a backlog, so we increased it from $2 million to $2.5 million in this year's budget. So we're excited about expanding that service. For code compliance, we got a new director over the last year. He came from the city of Arlington, and in Arlington they had a mobile tool shed program, which is what it sounds like. It's a mobile shed of tools that you can like reserve, and it can come to your house and you can borrow, like rent a lawnmower or a weed eater, things like that. The goal is so that you aren't getting code violation just because you don't have access to that equipment. So we piloted that program this year, and we've seen some success, and so we're going to try to expand that too. And then this budget continues the neighborhood improvement program. We'll do one new neighborhood in fiscal year 26, so that announcement will be coming up in the next few months. And then at the end of 2026, the calendar year, we'll open a new library in the far northwest part of the city. But in next year's budget, we'll have to hire the staff for that library and start to train them and stuff. So we're counting that as a win for this year's budget. Economic development, this budget, also a really high priority. This budget expands the partnership with our local chambers, so Fort Worth Chamber, Metropolitan Black Chamber, Hispanic Chamber, in order to deliver a small business program. Some of you may have heard about that over the last couple of months as we've talked about that some at the council level. And so that'll be a new program that is expanding in the fiscal year 26 budget year. We're also refreshing just our kind of whole strategy about economic development through a strategic plan. We have one. It's just been a long time since we refreshed it. And we just had a new director start today, actually. And so we thought it'd be a good time to just revisit the whole economic development strategy. And then there are a couple of public events capital projects this year, namely the Convention Center expansion, which has been planned for a bit, as well as the Will Rogers Memorial Complex, some capital projects happening there. And then we continue to invest in economic development initiatives to think about, how to incentivize businesses, bring more commercial to the city. And then last council priority, just kind of it's almost like a catch-all category. There's a lot of things that can fit in responsible growth. But we have a few highlights here. So next year, or fiscal year 26, we'll continue the comprehensive plan. So this is the city's long-range plan. It looks forward to 2050 and kind of asks, what do you want Fort Worth to look like in 2050? So we did some community engagement on that, like 6-9 months ago, even a year ago. And so some of you as, again, engaged community members, you may have participated in some of that. If so, thank you. And you'll have another opportunity soon. Next month, when we start to do bond engagement, we'll talk about the comprehensive plan at the same time. And so this budget allows us to continue those efforts. Hopefully we can wrap that comprehensive plan up in the next year. And then the city is sometimes behind on replacing vehicles and equipment. So as our fleet grows and ages, we want to close some of that gap with where we're behind on vehicles and equipment. Often those are forward-facing services like street sweepers. Those are new, but things like that you might see that help with delivering city services. We're also in the middle of a pay study in the city. So this is an outside group doing a pay study. There are a number of positions in the city that are hard to fill. So we kind of want to know, why can't we hire people into these positions or keep them in these positions. So everything but civil service is being studied through this pay study. We don't know yet what the results of that study will be, but what we know is we'll start to hear what they are in March or April, and we want to have a little bucket where we can start to implement some of the recommendations from that study. So we have a little bit of a budget for that. And then we'll talk a little bit more about fee structures for water, water rates, environmental, solid waste, and stormwater. So I'll do a quick couple of slides on property tax, and then I'm going to hand off the mic. So once again, look, I'm going to move to this side. Bye, guys. I'll go over here for a few minutes. So once again, the biggest source of revenue for the city is property tax in the general fund. And it funds all of our operating in the general fund and our debt service, as well as that cash funded capital. So in fiscal year 25, current budget year, our property tax value across the city, across those 4 appraisal districts, was $121.9 billion. And so again, we were running a lot of different scenarios, kind of trying to predict what would happen, particularly in light of TAD's reappraisal plan about the residential values. And so you can see kind of how it worked out. So the first row there, change in taxable value, $4.1 billion. Those are existing properties, both residential and commercial, that grew about 3%. So there were some scenarios in which we were projecting that to be almost flat. So we were happy with 3.4% growth. And then a new construction value, that's actually what it sounds like, new construction, grew 2.5%, or $3.05 billion. That's a pretty good number for us. We usually have about 2 or 3% in new construction growth, somewhere in that range over the last few years at least. And so in total, our fiscal year 26 taxable value across the city of Fort Worth, $129 billion in value. So we use that number to think about the tax rate, and everybody pays the same rate, residential, commercial. This year, recommended tax rate is 67 cents per $100 valuation of your property value. So that's a decrease from the current year's tax rate. The current year's tax rate is 67.25 cents. This is a 1/4 cent reduction. And I know, well, maybe it's not so small on this big screen, but on the right-hand side, you can see how the 67 cents breaks down. So on the bottom, it says debt, and that's the portion of our tax rate that funds our debt service. And so that also helps preserve our future bond capacity. So as we think about the 2026 bond and beyond, making sure that we still have room there to grow and invest in infrastructure and facilities and the things we need for a growing city. And then the top section, that top branch, says operations and maintenance. So the very top, operations, 45 cents, that's what funds the general fund. And it's a big portion of the general fund, like 60%. And so that's all of the, most of the things you think of as core city services. So things like police and fire and transportation and public works, parks, libraries, those are general fund services. And then the piece that says capital, that's 7.25 cents, and that is PAYGO. So that's that portion of the tax rate that we use for capital maintenance. So that is the way the 67 cents sort of adds up. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy Lemon. Christy's our assistant director in the Fort Worth lab. She oversees the budget process. You can have a break from me, and she'll go through our last few slides, and then we'll get to questions.
Perfect. All right, good evening. Thank you again for coming. So I'm just going to cover some of the details of the various funds, and then we'll get right to your questions. So this shows you the overall operating budget. So it's proposed at $3.09 billion, almost $3.1 billion. I'll just draw your attention to the top row. That's our general fund. So the general fund is what pays for kind of your basic city services. So code compliance, police, fire, parks, those type of services. So most people are familiar with those. You'll see that the general fund grew about 4.5%. And so we'll talk in a moment about where we spent that 4.5% growth. And then a few other funds here. So you'll notice that the special revenue funds grew quite a bit. The emergency medical services is a special revenue fund. So that's why you see that big growth there in that particular category. This is a breakout of the general fund budget. So you'll see in the top half is our revenue and the bottom half is expenses. So the key things here are really about our kind of our largest revenue sources. So those would be property tax and sales tax up at the top of the chart there. And then in expenses, just a couple of things here. So you'll see that most of our budget goes to personnel. So that's our biggest expense as a city organization in the general fund. And then you'll see there were some reductions in the general operations and maintenance category. So at the very beginning of the budget process, as Christiane said, we cut 1% from all the city departments. And so that represents part of that. And then there were also various reductions throughout the budget process to get us to a balanced budget. So some increases in personnel costs and decreases in operations and maintenance. It's kind of a high-level summary of the general fund. So let's talk about where we spent that 4.5% growth. So these are some of the key drivers for that. So 68% of the growth was spent on public safety. So a couple of things here. We do have contracts with our police officers and firefighters organizations, and so their pay increases are contractually obligated, so we always put those in the budget first. So you'll see those pay increases represented here. And then there's a $20 million subsidy for the EMS fund. So for emergency medical services, that MedStar service that the city began operating this year, there's a good amount of revenue that the service generates. So if you think about medical billing, that's where a lot of those costs are recouped. But it's not enough to pay for the entire service. So we're subsidizing that service with $20 million of general fund. So that's what that piece is. And then the next section is workforce. So this represents employee raises, not for police officers or firefighters, but for general employees. So that's what you see in the pay for performance program. So for city employees to get a raise, it's based on their performance. We don't do cost of living or across the board raises for employees, so it's based on a performance program. And so we have a pot of money there that we distribute to employees based on their good performance throughout the year. And then that second item, we're doing a pay plan study right now to see how competitive our pay scales are with all of the other folks we compete with for workers. So in the local metroplex, there are lots of little cities, and so we look at the other little cities to see what their pay rates are like. And then for some jobs, we also compete a lot with the private sector. So that study will tell us if our pay rates are on target or if we need to make adjustments. If we do need to make adjustments, we have a little bit of money here to start that process. It's probably a 5-year implementation, 3 to 5 years implementation, depending on what the recommendations are. And it's been about 10 years since we did a pay plan study. So it's not something we do really often, but the results are usually pretty significant. And so we're just waiting to see what those results look like. And then the final section here is for capital funding. So we put an additional $4.6 million toward capital maintenance. So this is the PAYGO funding that we're using property tax dollars to pay for capital maintenance. And we'll look at a chart in a few moments that show you where we put that additional $4.6 million. This shows some of the other funds that the city operates. So these are our enterprise funds. And enterprise funds operate sort of like a business. So if you think about the municipal parking fund, if you go downtown and you park in a meter, pay that parking meter, or you park in a city garage, the money that you pay in parking fees goes back into the fund to pay for that service. So it's kind of like a closed fund where the fees pay for the service. So several other examples there. You have municipal airports, the stormwater utility, solid waste, which is your trash and recycling pickup, and then water and wastewater, which I know you all are familiar with. These are our special revenue funds. So the first one is the Crime Control and Prevention District Fund, and many of you will know that the CCPD fund is paid for through a half-cent sales tax. So when anyone purchases something in Fort Worth, a half-cent of that sales tax goes into the Crime Control and Prevention District funds, which funds a lot of our policing programs and also some community programs as well. So you can see a little bit of growth there. That's based on projected sales tax growth. The next fund there is public events. So the public events department operates our Will Rogers Memorial Complex and also the Convention Center downtown. They have, when we look at capital in a moment, you'll see they have some really big projects planned for this year. So lots of stuff happening with those folks. And then the next fund is the Emergency Medical Services Fund. So you'll see no history for the current fiscal year, and then in the future fiscal year, we're proposing an $89 million budget. Most of that will be paid for through medical billing through fees. We will be subsidizing that fund $20 million from the general fund. And then we also have the Environmental Protection Fund. So that fund pays for things like air quality monitoring, some hazardous waste cleanup, a lot of litter abatement programs, which are very popular. And then we have the Municipal Golf Fund, we have 3 municipal golf courses in Fort Worth, and that fund operates those services. And then we have the Community Tree Planting Fund. So those are our special revenue funds. This is probably what you might be most interested in. So this is an average taxpayer bill, if you will. So the top line there represents the taxable value of the average home within our 4 appraisal districts. This has the homestead exemption applied to it already. And then you can see under the proposed budget for FY26 that the taxpayer would pay $20 less in property taxes. So that represents the quarter-cent reduction to the tax rate that Christiane talked about. And then you'll see there are a number of fee changes. So the stormwater fee is increasing about 64 cents a month. The, sorry, what's that? 35, sorry. It's hard to see, thank you, sorry. It's hard to see on that giant screen. Thank you, I appreciate that. I was on the wrong row, y'all. Okay, so 35 cents a month for the stormwater fee. Water charges are not increasing. Wastewater is increasing a little bit. And then you see, for the solid waste charges, you see a $3 a month increase. We haven't increased trash pickup fees, recycling fees, since 2003. So it's a really long time since we had a fee increase there. So that one is a little bit larger, but it's a long time since we've had that increase. And then you see the environmental fee, and then the total monthly fee increase is just a little less than $5. When you offset the property tax reduction, the average taxpayer would pay about $3 more per month. So fees going up a little bit, property taxes coming down a little bit, and that's what the offset looks like. This is the capital improvement plan. So every year we do a capital improvement plan for the next 5 years. So this shows our plan for FY26 and then the 4 years following. So in FY26, we have a $1.4 billion capital plan. This has a couple of really big items in it. So Christiane talked about the water, the 2 really large water projects. And then the convention center is also scheduled for a big upgrade this year. So there's a big capital program for public events in here as well. This shows where we put the additional PAYGO dollars. So that top line is the Transportation and Public Works Department, who's responsible for street maintenance. And so most of the additional dollars that we had for PAYGO went toward street maintenance. So those went to Transportation and Public Works. So you can see the blue line is our current fiscal year, and the green is the proposed budget. And then the Park and Recreation Department also got a little bit more of the share of dollars for PAYGO maintenance. So that's for parks maintenance. So those additional dollars really went toward street maintenance and park maintenance this year. So this is the overall budget, operating and capital. So the proposed budget for FY26 is almost $4.48 billion. And then of course we've done these meetings all around the city. So this is our last one this evening. And we are working toward a public hearing tomorrow evening, and then the City Council will vote on the proposed budget tomorrow evening. So with that, we are happy to get to your questions. We are streaming the meeting tonight, so if you have a question, we're going to bring the microphone to you, so we'll just ask that you speak into the mic. So
exactly. If you have a question, I'll bring you a mic so you can ask your question and we can get it on the stream.
I'll start with 2 questions that were submitted via text. District 8 has some needed improvements: Wilbarger, Vaughn, East Barriott, Riverside, and historic South Side water and sewer. When can we expect new projects in 2026 budget to be completed?
Those are probably bond questions. So we're going to have public meetings coming up on the bond next month. And so we hope you can come and participate. or send in questions for that bond discussion. That's probably the best place to answer those.
Yes, and
All right.
if there have specific like water and sewer questions, I would direct you to reach out to the water department. Go online. They have a capital program, and you can actually see the projects if there is an actual project set to see when it's supposed to come forward.
Another text question that came in, where in the budget are plans to restore, rehab Butler Housing Complex to help with our unhoused population?
So Butler is a Fort Worth Housing Solutions asset, so it's not part of the city. So that's part of the Fort Worth Housing Solutions, and they're actually we're working with them on an overall plan that includes TxDOT and the North Central Texas Council of Governments to improve access to that site. Because of all the highways that run by there, getting in and out of that site is really difficult. And TxDOT has improvements that are coming in the future for the highway system. And so the idea is to improve access into the site so then it can be redeveloped into housing, maybe commercial, those kind of things, and get redeveloped. So that's an ongoing, until those projects with TxDOT kind of get going and underway. Right now it's all in the planning process. That planning process is probably going to take 1.5 to 2 more years. So we have a question right here.
I was noticing on the screen that you all have, you're putting less into operating and maintenance for the city, and I'm a little disturbed that it looks like there's more concern about golf courses, and and mind you, I'll go to events at Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum Complex and the Convention Center. Our city is growing leaps and bounds. I don't understand why so much money is. For instance, I live on the south side in District 8 in Councilman Nettles' area, and it's just filthy. It's filthy. So operating and maintenance, I've wanted to maybe where you could, it's dirty. Yes, it is. That's a bunch of money to take away from operating and maintenance.
So actually operating and maintenance is actually going up. So the general fund's going up by about $50 million. That was at $48 million that it increased this year. And then if you see, can you put up the environmental management? I think it's the next one there. So environmental management, you see an increase of about $6.4 million. That's also, environmental management does like all the camp cleanups, the homelessness camps. They do also the street sweepers and the litter pickup, so that's increasing as well. You mentioned golf courses and something else. Will Rogers. So those dollars, so the golf course money can only be spent, it's only collected, all the golf courses are paid by the fees paid by golfers. And those dollars can only go back to the golf course. So you can't use it on anything else. So the golf courses don't cost us as citizens anything because golfers are paying for the cost of running the golf course. And so it's not an impact to taxpayers at all. It's just to the golfers. On the Will Rogers, so Will Rogers and Convention Center and all that tourist piece, that's all paid for through hotel occupancy taxes and through rental fees that we get from cars rented at DFW Airport, a share of that. And those dollars under state law can only go toward tourism. So all the improvements at Will Rogers, all the improvements of the Convention Center and those kind of things are being paid by hotel occupancy taxes that visitors pay when they come to Fort Worth. So it's not costing us anything. That's the best kind of money you can get as far as a citizen of Fort Worth. And so I wish we could use them for other things, but we can't. Under state law, you can only use them for those purposes. I know that there's probably an article in the paper, I saw it on the Fort Worth Report that said Will Rogers getting $22 million. It was from hotel occupancy taxes to improve the old buildings there. It's not out of tax dollars. So, yeah, last year there was a vote for 2% of the hotel to increase the hotel occupancy taxes that people pay at the hotels by 2% so that we could have enough dollars to make those improvements, yes.
Okay, and does this also include the Airbnbs?
The Airbnbs pay those taxes as well, yes.
Okay. Is there going to be some type of list of, I know that there's a circular in the water bill of different things like that. Is there anywhere going to be on the websites about things about the Airbnbs, just like there are hotels listings? Are we going to know about areas in the city that have those where people can possibly take advantage of those?
I think you can go to Airbnb and find out where they are in Fort Worth. Fort Worth, we have an overlay where they can only be located in certain areas because we don't want them in neighborhoods where they have a negative impact. So it's only adjacent to entertainment districts. So it's only in those areas, but I don't know if we have a list on our website, but you can go to Airbnb or VRBO and find the ones in Fort Worth.
Thank you.
All right, we have a question here.
Yeah, a couple, and I'll try to just do one because I know there's probably several. I noticed in the numbers, there wasn't a number of exactly how much you estimate that 20 some odd dollars totaling that's not going to be in the budget. And also, since those will be unrestricted funds, we see a lot of the restricted funds you're discussing, those will be unrestricted funds that could be used for anything. So what is the impact that could have on our communities had it still been collected?
What dollars?
You're mentioning the reduction in the tax rate.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
That's going to be approximately $20 per home, approximately,
right,
based on the estimate. That $20 is going to equal how much total?
$3.5 million.
So that's $3.5 million that we're not going to collect.
Correct.
That we're not going to be able to put in unrestricted funding because you're just saying a lot of our funding is restricted. We can't do anything else with it. Those dollars are unrestricted. So why aren't those going back to our communities?
Correct. So when we put this together, we knew we had increases. You want to show the average bill?
Yes.
So we're going to be recommending increases in fees. So your water fees, your wastewater fees, your trash fees, your environmental fee, your stormwater fee. And that was going to be an impact to citizens and homeowners, really, because they're the ones that pay those fees primarily. Businesses do too, but they're a big chunk of that. And so the idea of having the rate reduction was to try to offset the impact of that. And so I just took over in January, and one of the things, looking at things, especially the wastewater fund, that's the biggest one. I mean, the solid waste fund, we had, as was mentioned, we have not had an increase in that since 2003. That's 22 years of not having an increase in that fee. Meanwhile, we have a landfill that's going to fill up by 2035. We've been actually subsidizing, they've been using fund balance to cover the cost of operating the solid waste fund. We need to make some plans to decide 2035, when we run out of place to put all our trash, we need to put it somewhere else. And in order to do that, we need to have funds available to buy property, to actually build it, get permitted. And so I knew, as we were looking through this whole process, and we had budget meetings with the council members back in April, May, June, that's going to be a big hit, because this is the first increase of probably about 3 or 4 years to get where we need to be, because we're so far behind. I knew there was going to be an impact to everybody that owns a house that pays for solid waste, that pays for wastewater fees, that kind of thing. So the idea was try to get everything we needed to. We mentioned that one of the themes was to keep the budget almost like a maintenance budget, increase it where we could, but try to reduce that impact. And that's where that quarter cent goes, so that your tax rate, your tax bill, at least on the house side, goes down a little bit to offset some of the impact to the overall bill. So that was the reasoning behind that.
We actually have some questions that were submitted via email. First one being, how will you enforce business equity so local small businesses and minority-owned contractors get real access to these contracts, not just the same big outside firms?
So as most of you all may know, based on federal changes in the federal government, in order for us to be able to keep our federal grants, we had to do away with our MBE program, which was a Minority Business Enterprise Program. And so what we're putting into place is a small business equity program. And what's different about this, under the old program, you had to have a study, and under the old program, you had to utilize what they call the marketplace. So everywhere the city purchased goods is where you had to include businesses. So for Fort Worth, that was 5 counties. And so even though we had contracts that we had to we had to use to use Hispanic businesses, to use African American business, Asian businesses, a big bulk of that was from Dallas County and Collin County because they were part of our area. Under the new program for SBE, we're only targeting Fort Worth. So the idea is to have a program where we require bids to be submitted where they have subcontractors that are from Fort Worth specifically. So we're hoping that's going to have a bigger impact to have local Fort Worth companies have a better opportunity to get more contracts from the city. Yes, sir.
Can you come on my
Sure. Go around here. I don't want to step on anyone. Thank you, ma'am.
Please allow me to finish when I'm finished. I'll let you know. But I would like to know. Well, sorry. I'm all for all the city services and all that. My question is, like on South Houston, near Walmart, that street has been taught for at least 15 years. There's a lot more major always that need to be improved. You have streets throughout all the neighborhoods. And my question is, why don't we all have maintenance every year built into the budget? Yes, I know y'all just said about adding a maintenance fee, but some of these streets been taught for years, and not only that, y'all should have maintenance every year for sidewalk coverage, because y'all are good at building new streets, sidewalks, and coverage, but y'all horrible on maintaining all this.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. That's why if you saw, we did not change the tax rate part that goes to capital maintenance because we want that to increase, because those are the dollars that we use to maintain existing assets. And we mentioned that we're starting a study to look at a potential fee for street maintenance. Ultimately, the study that we put together shows that we need about $100 million a year in funds to maintain our streets so that they stay in decent shape before they get to the point where they get so bad you have to actually issue debt and do a whole reconstruction of the street. And in order to maintain the streets you need about $100 million. We only have right now 54 million, is that right? 55 million in the annual budget. And so the idea is to try to grow that as we go along, to get it up to that 100 million. And to do that, I mean, the quick way to do that would be to raise the tax rate and charge everybody, and not everybody wants the tax rate raised, right? And so we're trying to build toward that. This fee that we're looking at doing, we'll bring it back next year. It'll take about 9 months to do the actual study. We'll bring it back next year to see what makes sense, and can we get some additional dollars that you would then put with the maintenance fees. And I understand.
And I also heard you ask about sidewalk and curb ramp maintenance. So I would love to get with you after the meeting and get your contact information. While we don't have a sidewalk maintenance program, we have capital sidewalk dollars and projects. And we also have a new ADA, or American Disability Association Act. We have a new ADA coordinator that we've just hired. And that person is looking at how to identify and incorporate over time addressing some of the ADA needs in the city. So I would love to get with you and get your contact information so that we can try to help address some of your needs.
You are talking to someone that makes coming on people with disabilities for 18 years. I've been in front of the council several years about maintenance on sidewalks and curb ramps. I have begged. You're not listening. You're not listening.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry I interrupted her because I wanted to acknowledge that you do participate on our Mayors with Disabilities Commission, and you've provided some great feedback to us on sidewalks and even crosswalk features. And so I wanted to make sure she knew that I had your contact information so we can meet with you individually.
Okay, thank you, but saying I've been in front of the council many times over the years, begging y'all to have sidewalk and curb ramp maintenance built in to the budget. This is a ongoing thing. It's not one time thing over ever. Y'all want to think about it. It's ongoing.
Yes, yes.
All right, we have another one here.
Hello, me again. So specific to the tax rate question. So one of the things that we saw recently when we had our DEI meeting, and we could not keep that because of federal grants, and the fact that our budget was so dependent on those federal funds that it impeded us from making any decision that would affect those. If we're going to put away money that we could be collecting, isn't that putting us or continuing to keep us dependent on things that's going to force us to make decisions that may not be in the best interest of our local area? In addition to that, if we lower the tax rate now, one of the things you mentioned in the other meeting is we can only go up by certain amounts. Right. So if you lower it now, that means it's going to take even longer when we have to go back and raise it for those other things you were talking about. So how does that play in?
So actually lowering it accumulates more that we can raise it up because you can go back 3 years. So lower actually does the opposite of that. But so there's a different way of thinking of it, right? So all of us pay federal taxes. Who pays federal taxes? So is it me as city manager, is it appropriate for me to tell the federal government we don't want your dollars? Because they're not their dollars, they're our dollars. And so if we go through and raise our tax rate so we can come up with dollars to stop doing a program that we're currently using federal dollars to pay for, we're giving away money twice. We're increasing our local taxes, right, to pay for something that the Fed should be paying for. And I'm not saying that I have no control of what they're doing in DC, right? And from a purely city manager specific, from what I thought is fair to the citizens of Fort Worth, everyone here, everyone across the city, we all already pay our federal taxes. And so I didn't think it was appropriate for us to give up our federal taxes and our tax dollars. And I understand what you're saying.
Not saying you should.
But
what I'm saying is, are we building ourselves into a further hole that this will come up again? And I pay quite a bit of federal tax.
yeah, and we all do.
But are we doing something that's going to put us in a greater dependency when we could be building our fund balance? We could be moving some of those projects ahead. If this amount is $3 million
Right.
that we're not collecting as a society, and I pay taxes, I've had a home that was almost 4,000 square feet, so I pay property
Right.
taxes. I'm not saying for other people to pay something for me. I know that as a community, we have a social responsibility to each other. Are we helping ourselves if we're putting ourselves further in the hole?
Well, I don't think we're putting ourselves further in the hole because we're not asking that $3 million. We're not taking another $3 million of federal dollars.
Right, but we're giving away $3 million that we could put in unrestricted projects, or that we could build our fund balance up to insulate us.
I don't see it as giving it away. I see it. Everybody in Fort Worth is going to pay more. It's how much more do they want to pay?
And what percentage of that is residential versus commercial?
Of the overall of the $3 million is probably about 60%. About 60% of the tax base is residential. So 40% is commercial and apartments. So that difference, what you're talking about is having everybody pay more. I've been doing this for 26 years, 25 years. My goal at the end of the day was to get us a budget that made sense overall and that had as little impact to the citizens as possible. So that's where the rationale came from.
I'm just thinking long term.
Yeah. And I am too. That's why the solid waste fund is long term. Like I said, this is going to be the first year of several years of increases. Yes, ma'am. We don't have to ask these. Most of these don't have to do with the city. They're bond funds and Fort Worth ISD. It's for next month. Some of these.
Yes, my question is piggybacking off of my brother here. For sure, we're paying our taxes. A whole lot of maintenance that you said for maintenance. Okay, fine, great. Is that maintenance for the good stuff maintenance? Because I'm riding down the street, everything, they just filled some holes with some black stuff that's gonna be gone in 5 minutes or hit the top of fall with a cold freeze. And then like every time I call for some people's streets or the curbs straight up in the driveway, here comes this cheap. Okay, I'm not paying for cheap. I don't go out to buy cheap. Okay, we should get our sidewalks, our streets, okay, those holes fixed properly with good stuff, with our money that we're paying.
So that's a complicated question. If you call in for a pothole, for instance, right,
Potholes, the
or
curbs, and then they come and fill in those with the black, I don't know what you call it,
asphalt.
yeah, a temporary, and then you have to, so you're really wasting more money.
So it depends. Again, it's a complicated question. It depends on the street. If that street, for instance, is on the list to have water and sewer replaced and it's going to get reconstructed next year, then a temporary fix is done, so we don't have to tear out a really good permanent
But
patch.
they did come back. The street was done 2 years ago. I don't think they're hardly coming back anymore. And then, boom, right after the street was done and the hard weather.
Who's here from TPW? I think we want to get that information so they can check out to see what the work is being done.
Yes. Hi.
I mean, afterwards,
So-
if you can get an address so you can find out what specifically is the issue, so we can see
Okay. Okay.
if the work's not being done.
Based on what the gentleman was asking you and based on what was said, okay, I know that they took DEI away and things like that, the verbiage.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that there was monies that we still received because we took that away? What is the new verbiage for it so people would know what to ask for? You know, like there are programs, I'm sure that DEI helped. Now that it's gone away, we'll take the verbiage away.
DEI has become a political. We still have the Office for Civil Rights is still in the city, right? We still have the ADA, for instance. We still have the Human Relations Commission. We still do housing discrimination reviews, all those kind of things. So the pieces that were eliminated were more of the MBE program, which is Minority Business Enterprise Program, where the city had an ordinance that were a percentage of contracts when you you hired a construction firm, they had to have a percentage of that, 10% had to go to a minority-owned business. Those are the pieces that kind of totally disappeared.
So it's still so people can still, is it, I guess
We
my
just
concern
we switched over to,
okay, SBE.
so we switched over to a small
Name, so
SBE.
people will know you can still get
Yes.
an assistance.
Small
and it's
business
called
enterprise.
SBE.
Right, and so now it's for small businesses, and it's not based on race or gender or ethnicity. It's open to all businesses
Okay.
across the board.
Thank you.
Sir, you had a question? Where? I can't see. Oh, Mr. Martinez, I couldn't see with the.
One of my concerns is about the like at Cobb Park. We lost over $2 million, or about $2 million over funding for the roads that were supposed to be redeveloped over there in Cobb Park, and it was taken off because they didn't follow it in time. Because then they found out they're going to have to dig under for the plumbing underneath on the bottom, so it would have been redundant, and so we lost the funds that were federal funded. This is before you, so but. What I want to know is there are other projects that are being done, and I know it's pay-go system. At what like the priorities for District 8? What priorities are being placed for District 8 as far as pay-go projects in District 8 area? What are the top priorities for us?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. It depends on each department, right? And each department has a listing citywide, and then for the dollars for this next year. But if you're interested in streets, for instance, there is a list of streets across the city, and we can go through where those dollars cover for, and you can find the ones in District 8. If you raise your hand, and we can get with you and provide you that information, that detail. You had a question back here.
I was gonna answer his question on Cobb Park.
Cobb Park, yes.
That's a really good example of the patching, whereas we did have ARPA funds to reconstruct the Cobb Park roads, but in coordination with the water department, we did understand that they're gonna come through there with some improvements, so we held off. Those funds were repurposed. We didn't give any money back. They're repurposed to other projects. And so now we're going back to make temporary replacements to the potholes until they can come in and do the water replacement and fix the street the right way.
So that is going to be totally done, right? It just got delayed because water and sewer have to redone? Yeah. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I'd like to ask a question concerning the budget regarding the police department. I'd like to know, within your budget, what trainings are going to be used, some of the money used to train your police officers with mental health problems, diversity, these type things. So have you outlined in your budget what you're going to use it for?
Yes, the CCPD portion of the budget pays for training and pays for the academy. And so all of the different programs are outlined in the CCPD, and it includes, there's officer wellness. In fact, the city just entered into a new partnership with R3, which is a group that works on mental health wellness for first responders, and also for folks that come from the military that have PTSD. And so that's part of the overall budget. There's dollars in there to cover that. And then on the training side, that's just part of the ongoing training that police get, plus what they get through the academy when they first get through the process.
Okay. And also within the budget, how many officers will be put within the neighborhood, not officers, but offices where they're located for community policing?
So I'm not sure about any additional new storefronts, if you're talking about like police storefronts, but we are adding 8 new neighborhood police officers with the new beat map. Typically on the neighborhood police stations that come up, that usually has to do with some business or something will provide space for them to be able to do that. But I don't think we have anything specifically in this budget to add any.
Only 8 new officers? Only 8 new officers?
8 new officers, well, because, yeah, it was 10. There's 8 new officers, neighborhood police officers, plus 2 school resource officers. But currently, the police department is going through academies to get to 100%. They have vacancy of about 100 police officers. They're not going to get to full police strength until next August. So it didn't make sense to add positions that you couldn't fill anyway. So once they get to that point, next year we'll be coming back probably asking for additional officers. Now he's got a question back there.
Okay. How does this budget address the shortage of code enforcement officers that we continue to discuss at our neighborhood meetings?
So one of the reasons there's a shortage of code enforcement officers is we talked about the pay plan, and is because we have trouble keeping positions full. We train them in Fort Worth. Bedford offers $20,000 more. Our three-year code compliance person goes to Bedford, goes to Euless, goes to Southlake. And so one of the things that we've done in this budget is we've added, before the pay plan, I added money to increase the pay on code compliance officers. So hopefully we can, in this next year, get our code compliance office or folks full. The other piece that we did is it talked about animal control. One of the areas where we have an issue is I won't say the worst, but one of the worst positions at the city are the folks that work in the kennels and clean out the kennels and deal with all the animals. They're overcrowded. You have to clean the kennels. They have to put animals to sleep, all those kind of things that are just, have a bad impact. And so keeping those positions full is a hard job too. What we've gone to is we have kind of like the Upstart crews. We've worked with a group that takes folks that were formerly homeless that are trying to get back on their feet. And this funding will use crews to supplement the folks at the animal facilities to come in and help clean up, and they'll have a job and come out of homelessness and that kind of thing. So that's what was at it. But hopefully this first round this year is to try to get our code compliance officer positions all filled, and then we see an impact. And as we go forward, then maybe next year if we need for more code compliance officers. Right now we just have a high vacancy rate. So we're trying to address that.
One last question, and this is an easy one. So I appreciate I appreciate what you're doing, and I want to thank staff and everybody that put all this together. Thank you, Councilman Nettles, for getting this in this location. My question, listening to what you're sharing, and that you do have a longer range plan for all of these things, it's hard to estimate the efficiency of a budget in a vacuum. So how do we, or when will we see what this looks like as that 2050 plan or whatever that looks like, so we can actually see if the changes that we're being asked to accept here are going to have a long-term benefit, a long-term deficit, and how does it actually address all the concerns of restricted, unrestricted, bond, and other areas that we can't really evaluate by looking at just 1 year?
So Christiane's staff, we have an analytics group, and we're working toward putting on our website, toward having dashboards in all these different areas to show progress, to show how we're doing. Are we meeting our targets for the funding? Are we filling code compliance officers' positions? Is that leading to more, folks doing a better job? If you haven't met our new code compliance director, the guy's great. I've always thought that in the past, sometimes code compliance was a little bit heavy-handed. They came in dressed like soldiers, right? They came to your door, were intimidating. One of the first things he did is he changed what they wear to khaki pants and a golf shirt. And we mentioned that we included funds. I included funds for the expansion of the mobile tool shed program. If you haven't heard about that, so currently in the neighborhood improvement program neighborhoods, we piloted a program where the city got a trailer and a van or a truck, and if you live in that neighborhood and your yard is overgrown, you don't have a lawnmower, you don't have a weed eater, you can schedule, they'll come and drop it off. You can use it, then you call them and they'll come and pick it up and take it away, all for free. The idea is to try to help clean up neighborhoods, help keep neighborhoods in better conditions, better neighborhoods that are more maintained or better shape overall. It was working so well, we added funds to do that citywide. So now, starting October 1st, or soon after, because we have to buy all the equipment, It'll be available citywide. So if you know anybody that has a hard time, their lawnmower's not working, they get a warning from code compliance because their yard's overgrown, they can call and get this equipment so they can get their lawn back and not have to pay a fine. So that's one of the programs he brought to us when he was hired. So. Well, thank you all for your time. Do you want to close it out? Or thank you all for your time and thanks for your questions. And we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay Chopper. And I want to add one more thing to what the conversation we discussed. We start the budget process, as Jay talks about, in February, March, and April. And so some of the things you asked about, which street is getting improved versus which streets are not, those conversations start much earlier. So when we get here, we're actually telling you what the whole budget looks like. And as far as the tax rate, we have been having that conversation on council as the tax rate. And sometimes it's political and sometimes it's just saving money. And so that's a conversation that this council takes up every year. And so it's just not one individual. So what I want you to do is, if you live in District 8, if you have members that live in other districts, to reach out to their council member and tell their council member how they feel about it as it relates to what we should be funding and what we should not be funding. And so today, what you have seen is what we as a council, or the majority, have come up with. The tax rate should be this for this year so that we can lower our taxes to help some of our seniors and our residents. But Jay Chopper has done a good job with his team and staff to provide this information today. And so I just want to encourage you to reach out to your council members, or if I'm your member, reach out to me, and so that I can know exactly how we can help you in your district, in your neighborhood. So thank you guys for coming out again. Is there any other more budget meetings?
The last one, and then next month we'll start to list questions about like capital projects and redoing of streets. The bond, we're going to be going to the citizens with a proposed bond program for 2026, which is an $840 million bond program. And there won't be a tax rate increase tied to that. It's covered with the current tax rate.
Right, and that's very important. You talked about the asphalt improvements with PayGo and then capital improvements for streets. We got to make sure we pass this bond package. So you guys need to make sure that you are at the table and for the conversation of what you want to see happens in our next bond. So thank y'all for coming out. I'll stick around for a few more questions, probably, if you want to have those. Y'all have a wonderful evening. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.